Hello and welcome to the Big Why, activism, advocacy, and the climate call to action. The goal today was bring together a few people that I personally find inspiring from the climate and climate adjacent world and ask them what inspires them, what's their activist origin story, their advice for folks that also feel the call but don't know how to get started. So going to ask them what Calgary activism needs right now and how we can more effectively help one another, and probably close with a call to action from them for our viewers and listeners. But gosh, quite a lot's happened last night and is still happening today and for the foreseeable future. And so I think we're going to just start with how we process this kind of thing, and maybe we'll find our way to some form of catharsis somehow before we get to all the rest of all that under other wonderful stuff. So I want to thank all my guests for coming out today. How's everybody doing?
Okay under the circumstances.
Same.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So to begin with, I'll just ask you to say your name, the organization you're with, and just a few short words about the focus of your organization. Maybe we'll start with Heather Addy.
Hi, everyone. Heather Addy. I'm with the Calgary Climate Hub, which is a local nonprofit that brings Calgarians together to take action on climate, both at the municipal level and sometimes at a broader level as well. Everything from hands-on tree planting to advocacy with city council.
And also a charter member of our nature node who does some very important work. Let's move over to Lex.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Lex. I'm the executive director of Green Calgary. And Green Calgary is a charity, been around in Calgary for about 45 years now. And we do all sorts of things, mostly concentrated around education. We educate in schools, workplaces, out in the community. We're very well known for our rain barrel programs. So if you've ever seen me, it's probably in relation to our rain barrels.
Yes, indeed. And how about you, Colin?
Yeah, I'm Colin Smith. I'm part of the grassroots organization called the Land Lovers Network, where we are weaving together the community of the South Saskatchewan River Basin across southern Alberta for land and water protection and restoration, from the smallest plot of land in your backyard up to the whole large landscape scale of southern Alberta.
Excellent. And Celia Lee.
Hi there, I'm Celia. I'm Executive Director of Sustainable Calgary. Our work is founded in indicators of sustainability, which is pretty holistic, but then we've really deep dived in our project work into planning for health. How do we plan cities for human and animal health?
I'm Philip Meinzer. I work as a conservation specialist with Alberta Wilderness Association, or AWA, which is an environmental NGO based out of Calgary, that works to try and expand protections for wilderness and wildlife in the province.
I'm Katie Morrison. I'm the executive director of the Southern Alberta chapter of the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, or CPAWS. And CPAWS is a national organization, but we have these local chapters across the country that work on local issues. And our mission here in Southern Alberta is to protect and conserve the vital ecological functions of public lands and waters in the province.
Sure. So started out in the 50s, 60s-ish as a birding group, and then transformed into a very sleek name of the Calgary Field Naturalist Society, responsible in part for the creation of parks like Nose Hill, and a particularly impressive history of data collection that has been used by the city over the years of the natural, both flora and fauna in Calgary, that we continue to do through things like the City Nature Challenge. So it's a mix of advocacy and education and field trips and that kind of stuff. My role is I'm the head of the advocacy committee, and I sit on the board, and it's just over a year since I got involved with them.
Thank you very much. And also with us today is Elaine Laflamme. She's with the Arusha Center, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about that organization, but they're the grant sponsors that are helping pull this show together. So thanks for being here, Elaine.
So, Steve, do you want me to come in midway or just give my full spiel right now?
You know what? Well, you know what? Might as well go for it. You've got the floor. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name's Elaine Laflamme, and as Steve said earlier, I'm working with Arusha on building capacity in a climate network. And I'm really excited that all of you could be here today and that I could be here with you. As part of a climate grant, climate action grant, or what we call the CAGs at Arusha, we're sponsoring 2 climate-related discussion groups with experts like you from several climate-related nonprofit organizations in the Calgary area. And essentially, the purpose is to highlight climate-related initiatives and activism that your organization may be currently engaged in. But we'd also wanted to give everyone on the calls the opportunity to interact with others engaged in similar projects. So I hope you'll find this valuable and engage in lots of discussion and learn from one another. Turn it over to you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Elaine. So as I mentioned at the outset, there has been a sort of a historical event that the world is I think it's safe to say the whole world is trying to parse out and figure out and see what it means. And I know for myself, it wasn't a regular morning. I didn't sleep at all last night, and I watched way too much of it on way too much of the news the night before. None of that's good for Steve, but I surely tuned into every second of it. And so for this morning, I can just say that as far as how I began processing, I did a little self-care by not turning on the news and by avoiding the socials, which are still, that's still good advice as of 4:13 p.m. today, I think. I also did some comfort food. I got myself a double and a sausage breakfast sandwich with a hash brown. That's highly recommended as well. And then I put on some really high caliber classical music, and I started writing out what a way forward looks like after all of this. And you'll see those on the socials in the time to come. But maybe I'll just start in the top corner again with Heather. Heather, did you approach your morning any different today?
Well, I did, Steve, in my morning, maybe started around 2 or 3 for a while.
Okay.
And what I did was I hauled out some of Rebecca Solnit's writing. I'm sure she's a familiar name to many people. She has a book called Not Too Late, which she's written with someone else whose name I'm drawing a blank on at the moment, about the climate crisis and how it is not too late. But she has written extensively on hope. And I find her thoughts on hope and the people that she quotes to be very helpful to me on a day where there's a lot of emotions like fear and anger and despair. And she makes the point, and she's quoting the activist Miriam Kaba, saying, hope is not an emotion, it is a discipline. And it is a commitment to a way of being in the world. And I reread a lot of her work early this morning. And it really helped me think, okay, yes, the events of last night are really hard and have a lot of potential to make the road a lot darker and harder. But, you know, we will continue the work, and it's a commitment. Yeah. And it's a discipline.
You know, for me, I look at any of this sort of stuff and I'm always saying, okay, like this is reality. So I've got to accept it and just figure out, where do I go? Right. And I had a conversation this morning with someone who said to me that they'd got some really great professional advice from someone years ago who said, you can't, or you shouldn't live your life by what someone you don't respect does.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's maybe not universal, but I do think that helped me today to say, like, yeah, like, I'm going to pay attention to the people who I do respect and what they're doing, and, you know, say, I've got to accept what the reality is, and I've got to find a way forward. Maybe what was a little bit different is, I started sharing this with other people this morning.
Right.
As everyone deals with this stuff at a different pace and in a different way. And so just trying to help everyone kind of pull through and see, what the path might be.
I've tried not to pay too much attention to it. I had a good distraction last night of being in a room with 300 other concerned citizens about water and the risks of coal development in southern Alberta. There was a wonderful event put on by the Chinook Watershed crew in Nanton with lots of diverse interest holders and concerned citizens that came out, and carpooled with a couple people who I really respect, and we didn't talk about it one bit on the way home, and I had a little extra sleep in this morning, but I just continued on with my work. Yeah, with things that I have agency over. There's nothing I could do to influence what happened in that country. So, yeah, but I guess trying to be a considerate, better friend and colleague to those who are struggling with it. But yeah, just keep going. If it wasn't for the age of information, we wouldn't even know what happened. So I'm trying to just keep focused on what's in front of me.
The election was big news, but there was a lot happening in Alberta last week for ourselves and the environmental space. So I was really, I was able to almost distract myself with work last week. So I don't think I've really, totally sat with it yet. But on any of the calls I was on last week, I just, emphasized to folks, prioritize your mental health, take the time you need to sort of process whatever you're going through. But I think overall it doesn't really change the work that's ahead of us, and maybe just in maybe like not so positive way can just inspire us to do better and more work to prevent maybe something similar happening here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually down in Colombia last week with some other CPAWS folks from across the country, post COP16, which is the Global Biodiversity Conference. And we were having some of these conversations because we felt like there was a lot of hope coming out of COP16, but then also a lot of stuff happening back home, and as you mentioned, in other places that are maybe less hopeful. So we were talking a lot about like hope being a practice, that it's not something that just kind of comes to you or that you just feel passively, but something that you actually have to practice every day through your actions. So, if Bob was saying he just sort of like continued on with the work that needs to happen, and some of that is just because there's so much work to do and maybe we need to pause a little bit more than we do. But I think a lot of it is we get hope from taking action. We get hope from seeing other people take action. And that can be really powerful even when times are tough.
I was also up quite late last night, but I have to say doing this show was a bit of a gift, because I felt like someone had asked me, "Hey Celia, what's the plan?" And I feel like going forward, that might be a gift to give to people around me. So instead of just sort of, I don't know, just simmering in anxiety, I was thinking, well, what is the plan? And it had me thinking about a conversation I had with students at the University of Calgary about the Sustainable Development Goals. And they asked some really tough questions like, how do we make sure no one's left out of global development? And so it had me thinking about, well, what does maturity mean going forward? And so in that context, I was thinking, well, there's a lot of magical thinking going on right now about sort of addressing climate change and the idea that if we wait, we're not harming people. So there's some magical thinking. But on the other side, there's also the idea of not catastrophizing. And so last night I was thinking, all right, this is the reality now, like you said, Lex. What are some of the scenarios ahead of us? And how do our strategies change now? And I think that's what we need right now is a bit of maturity, not magical thinking, not catastrophizing, but coming up with a plan, doing the work, not running on, like cat fumes and stress, but just kind of moving forward. Doing some self-care, baking pies, eating them.
I like it. I like it. And I really applaud what to do next wasn't actually on my list of questions here, but I think it's a fair one. And I don't blame anybody if you don't have an answer available. But one of the things when I did finally, past the breakfast sandwich and the double, and when I started to write this out, I started to think about what to do next. And something that occurred to me, I'm not much of a military guy, but I've always liked the unofficial slogan of the U.S. Marine Corps, which is improvise, adapt, and overcome. And I started thinking about that from the terms of the climate movement. And one of the questions that came to me is, um, you know, there's this brand new global energy transition economy that's upon us, and in the North American marketplace, the biggest player is staying home. Now we can look at that as a crisis, or we can look at that as an opportunity as a country. What does it mean if we decide to say, okay, they're sitting out again? What do we want to do? How do we want to take advantage of that? Does anybody else have a what next for us in the middle of all this?
I think that's a really interesting take on it, and I'd like to take more time thinking about that later. My thought had been that in that particular country, progress isn't going to come from the top down. And I'm really grateful for institutions and the power they have in making large scale change. I also think that we've relied on them in a way that, as citizens, a lot of us rely on the techno fix, like industry is going to figure it out, government's going to figure it out. Now we're in a situation where that's not the case. And so we have to develop these other skills of like, well, how do we start doing this from the grassroots? How do we do it in maybe local governments? How do we do that through our culture, through our action? And so maybe there's this opportunity to develop skills that maybe we've let go too dormant in the meantime.
Yeah, I'm just really appreciating what Celia said, because I think for me, one of the pieces to counteract the despair that people may be feeling, just coming back to that hope is a discipline, part of that is the commitment to act, but to recognize that that action needs us to come together and do it. And so I think this is an opportunity to really commit to what that means to come together and get that communal action, and think about how do we reach out to people that maybe we aren't reaching out to yet? How do we make this a bigger umbrella and pull more people in? And this is a really good opportunity, I think, to say, okay, how do we do that? How do we reach out to groups that we haven't yet? Because probably a lot of people are feeling, as Celia was saying, we've been relying on other institutions or groups to do things, and now that's not going to happen. So maybe more people are feeling like, okay, now what? And it's a crisis time, but maybe also an opportunity.
Lex, the Joan Baez, the famous quote that I like is that dovetails with all this very nicely is the antidote to despair is action. Are there some actions that maybe are rambling around in your brain that maybe weren't before all of this?
Honestly, I think that before all of this, I was thinking, we need to collaborate more together. Like I've been feeling this for a little bit, like, let's really sort of amp up how much collaboration we have. And then this just told me, oh yeah, like this is now an imperative, like, because I think Heather's really got it. Like we need to work more with people, and not just the people that we haven't reached out to yet, but the people that we have, find more ways that we can bring our collective voices together. It's because exactly, like we need to take actions, and we're always going to be stronger together. And we're facing a lot of adversities that are already united. And so I think just continuing to try to look for more ways that we can do more together is really key.
I'm trying to bring people together. Yeah, togetherness, I guess would be the theme. And not having any like us versus them as much as possible.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think when we can make connections on a closer, more intimate level, it's easier to diffuse some of those tensions that are amplified when we're individualized or taking on the world on a solo front. But yeah, but it's also challenging. We're all limited by time and resources, and yeah. So one of the big themes that keeps coming up is just trust and trust building between uh, people and organizations, and that takes time. But yeah, things happen at the speed of trust. Is something that a theme that keeps resonating for me lately.
You can be an advocate, but for the most part, advocacy is not necessarily your day job. So you have a job and then you have your advocacy, or sometimes your day job is advocacy, and then your volunteer stuff is advocacy. And at a certain point, I find I hit a wall where I'm involved in a lot of stuff, but not actually really contributing or doing a lot. I'm just showing up, which is good because every organization needs people to just show up, but they also don't make any progress if you're just showing up. So I think when you hit a wall, you gotta give yourself a break. That's the only thing I can suggest. And if you do truly believe in what you're doing, and you know that ultimately you want to stay involved, that you can't advocate for other things if you're not advocating for yourself. So you got to just give yourself some time to rest. If you're on a bunch of boards or you're whatever, you say, I can't do anything for the next couple months, just because I'm burnt out. I wish I could say that to my job, but but people have families, people have lives. We've got a lot of big issues that we got to deal with. So sometimes you have to put yourself first before you can help others out.
What I want to get into now is just a little bit about, what less about your organizations and more about what brings you to all this, and how, and by all this I mean to going against the grain often, and fighting for what's right, and working on the biggest challenge on the planet that for some reason so many people can't yet bring themselves to come to. So maybe I'll just begin by asking you what inspires you, and I'm going to take away one of your answers, because I'm just going to give you my example first. And one of the things that inspires me is working with smart people that have goals, and that are addressing the problem, and working on those solutions. So I took that away from you, but it really is one of the things that does inspire me, and it brings joy into my life, where sometimes you might feel a little alone and dark. So it's also my way of, again, thanking you for coming on, and being the great people that you are. But Heather, what sort of stuff inspires you, in addition to that wonderful book that we're now going to have to all check out,
Yeah.
and I will definitely include in the show notes for today?
So, the thing that has inspired me the most since I've started volunteering with the hub, has been the response by the public and communities to the mini forests that we're planting.
Oh
So
yeah.
we've had so many people, when we plant one of these mini forests, we have so many people signing up. The last one we did at the Genesis Center in the Northeast, there must have been 80 some folks that turned out on quite a chilly, awful Saturday morning. There were so many kids there. We had an entire Boy Scout troop, I think, and we had a whole bunch of employees from a company. But just the willingness to come out and dig in the soil on a cold, windy morning, and the feeling of creativity and agency. And I think Another writer I really appreciate is Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's an Indigenous botanist and author and educator. And she writes about pushing back against this paradigm that, the forces against us are so big, we can't destroy Monsanto or whatever. But what we can do are these actions together. And it's a feeling of joy and a feeling of agency and a feeling of creating something great for our city together. And just that connecting with nature as well, that I go out and weed in these little forests, which people aren't as keen about coming out to weed, but we're working on it. But just spending half an hour weeding, I just feel so much better. And I think it's partly we know that spending time in nature and with plants is really good for you, but it's just that feeling of here's something I can do. And I guess it's the idea of being the change you want to see. But the other quote I like about it is the road is made by walking, that we create that path. And when we start to pay attention to things like community and nature in the city and restoring biodiversity, that's a really powerful counterbalance, I guess is the word, to push back against those forces that say, here's what you're supposed to pay attention to. You're supposed to pay attention to division and political violence and all of that. And we can say, no, we choose this other path and we're building it together.
I love Heather's answer, and a lot of other people around me always inspire me too. But to go in a little bit of a different direction, it's actually looking to the past and what people have been able to accomplish in the past. Before I went into this sort of work, I had taken a degree in archaeology. I had spent time digging up artifacts. And I had this moment when I was working in Fish Creek Park here in the city, and I had this artifact in my hand, which was it's kind of a hand axe. It's called a spall chopper. So I was holding this tool in my hand, and I'm like, somebody made this. There's an Indigenous person here who made this 8,000 years ago, or something.
Yeah.
Like that. I think maybe it wasn't that old, but somewhere around there, thousands of years ago, somebody made this and used it for years and then left it here, and then I encountered it again, and it just sort of something about what humanity has been able to accomplish. I mean, obviously we've done some pretty bad things too, but all of these like amazing things that we've been able to do, and I look back on those and I say, well, then we can do this too. Like,
Yeah.
we can solve this problem because we can see how we've dealt with just amazing challenges for such a long period of time. And so that's always something that comes back to me, is just thinking about, how people have come so far and we can go further.
I would say it all starts from the land and nature. That's where my biggest sources of inspiration, energy, intuition come from. And yeah, that tree planting event that you mentioned that you were at, the first tree planting event, was one of the reinforcing inspirations to me starting Land Lovers Network. I rode my bike over, and I couldn't stay for the whole event, but I was expecting maybe there'd be 20 people there, and I wanted to go, who shows up to a tree planting event? And I came around the corner, and there was like a massive crowd of like 150 people, and I said, okay, we're on to something like this. We're on to something here. People are craving, like we all, and maybe that's a broad statement, but many people are looking for a connection to nature, to play a role in having a reciprocal relationship with nature or giving back. I think a lot of people recognize that we've taken a lot, and we need to play a role in giving a role in giving back to nature or supporting nature in a positive way. So yeah, that's really what feeds my fire, to see other people like on a direct conscious level, but also an unconscious level of how people crave the connection to the natural world. And so yeah, we're really through my work, I'm really trying to find ways to bring people, provide opportunities to do that on a long-term and like cultural evolution basis. This is not short-term work. This is like, we've tried a lot of the things to address climate change and address the challenges that we face. And in the 20 years that I've been aware of the challenges, there hasn't been a lot of movement. And so what's the deeper root here? And I think back to like reconnecting with Mother Nature or the ecosystems in which we reside is a key to that. So that's, yeah, it all starts in the land. It all starts in the soil.
Beginning is kind of similar. I've always been a little bit obsessed with ecosystems. I love the beauty and the complexity of them. I get pretty fired up when people compare the complexity, or when people talk about the economy, because the complexity of ecosystems, they're just so much more complex than economic systems, and yet somehow we've organized ourselves around economic systems. From there, I actually also worked in poverty reduction for a bit. And with that one, I think I just realized how many advantages that I have and how those advantages are luck. And I wanted to take luck out of it, and just make sure that we all have support when we need it. And also sort of starting to see the relationship between, like, and this should have been obvious, but the relationship between the well-being of people and the well-being of our planet. But I had to go through a process to kind of to learn that. And then lately, it's about seeing just like what my colleagues are able to come up with as solutions to our environmental crises in urban environments. And they're just so beautiful and they're so elegant. And I think I get a little bit obsessed with like just the beauty of it. And I could look at their design drawings for hours. So
Love it. The work of others, nature, and the works of nature and the work of others.
But when I first got involved, I think it was the enjoyment of I liked going for walks, and I hated seeing things that were destroyed or suffering. As far as the nature stuff goes, these days, the main thing that inspires me to get involved is being mad at all the bad decisions that are being made by those higher up. So that's the primary motivation. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things to get motivated with these days.
When it comes to sort of environmental issues and the movement more broadly, you know, I'm inspired by those around me, like those who I interact with sort of on a weekly basis. But also, I just think that there are groups of people, Indigenous people included, who have been, you know, struggling on behalf of the environment and for the environment for much longer than I have. So I'm only really getting started. And so I just look at the history of struggle on behalf of these communities. And although it's like incredibly unfortunate what they've had to go through, I kind of use them and their efforts as a way to keep myself motivated, knowing that, you know, this is something that is not going to end necessarily in my lifetime or be fixed in my lifetime, but it's like about, you know, passing on the fight to protect these places we love, and the environment for future generations. So yeah, that's one that's like a constant source of inspiration for me.
For me, I think it's three things. One is the lands and places themselves. So, you know, it is hard to go out in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains and not be inspired to try and protect those places and the amazing scenery, the clean water, the, you know, diversity of wildlife and fish. So certainly for me, going out on the land is really important for me, keeping my motivation and keeping my hope. The second is the people. And that's, you know, the people that I work with in my organization who are so passionate and also finding joy in the things that they're doing. But it's also the people out on the ground in the communities who are, you know, in their own ways, from their own perspective, whether it's, you know, ranchers or farmers or Indigenous people or just community advocates, are doing things, taking action, making change in their community. And then third is actually seeing some of that progress. You know, I've been in this work long enough that I can see the impact of campaigns that I and others have been involved in and know that they wouldn't have turned out the same way without that, you know, collaborative, powerful push, and without the, you know, even my little piece of those campaigns. And so it's really inspirational. to think about, what have we achieved, and how we keep that momentum going forward.
Yeah, that's a big thing to actually see the change happen and to feel there's momentum, and that encourages you to keep on pushing. I know we do experience that in the Calgary Climate Hub as well. But thinking again to all of those people that start thinking they've got to make a change now after something happens. Um, what's your advice to someone that's feeling that call but doesn't know where to start? Because I think that's everybody. I think everybody starts out going, "Oh God, okay, nobody's going to actually fix this for me. I've actually got to do this. Now, what the hell do I do now?" Um, so Heather, what the hell do they do now?
One thing is to think about what Colin said about how everybody's got a gift. So think about what skills you have, or what excites you, or what makes you want to get up out of bed in the morning, and how do you bring that to collective action? So maybe that's coming out to plant trees, maybe it's joining a bunch of seniors in talking to the banks about investments. What skills and a background do you have? What makes you excited about getting up in the morning and contributing? And then look for a group that's doing that work, and thinking about, even if it's a small thing, even if it seems like a tiny thing, it's still a piece of how we can change the world. So it doesn't have to be, I'm going to overthrow Monsanto tomorrow. It's, I'm going to go out and I'm going to help weed the mini forests or something.
Say pretty much exactly what Heather was saying. Really, anywhere, do anything. Like, I think that because it's such a big problem, people get this sort of like analysis paralysis, like, what do I do? What does the most? What, but that's like, if you get out there and you do anything, you'll find what your gift is, or what excites you. You might go out and you might, volunteer for something. You might just do something on your own. Maybe that turns into a passion. Maybe you drop it after an hour. Like, but you have to start somewhere, and like literally just do whatever. First thing that comes to mind. And I've met people who were like, well, I saw some litter on the ground and I didn't know what to do, so I picked it up. And then they turned that into like their hobby or their passion, or even spun that out into being like an organization. Like, you don't know where you're going to go, but you have to take the first step, right? So I think Heather's exactly right. Like, find what you're great at. But I mean, if you don't know, just do anything.
Would somewhat echo those things. Yeah, I think we all have this. Some of them are louder than others, but there's a voice in our heads or in our hearts that's always like nagging us to do something, or it's an idea that we can't let go of. And we might think it's impossible or not culturally acceptable or whatever it might be, but that's, in my perspective, your soul trying to speak to your psyche and your ego, and to, like, we all have, again, in my perspective, we all have something we're here to do, that gift that we have to offer. And it's like the gold inside of us, but it's buried deep down and it needs to be unearthed. And sometimes the answer isn't doing anything. Sometimes the answer is sitting and resting, or doing something that doesn't make any sense to anybody else, but you have to do it. And you have to build the confidence and trust in yourself to do that thing, just no matter how difficult or uncertain it might be. I've heard it explained, like, if you don't do that thing, it will pathologize itself in some other way in you until you come around to do it. And it probably doesn't make sense to you at the time, but life is a long and winding road, that it's not a straight line. And it doesn't make sense when you're looking into the fog and trying to figure out what's over the next horizon. But when you turn and look back, it's this path that makes sense and is unique to you, and it's the thread that we follow. So I would suggest spend time in nature, read poetry, talk, if you are uncertain about something, talk to a trusted friend or an elder, or to the river or to the stars or something, get really weird about it. So maybe that would be how I would summarize is don't be afraid to put yourself out there and be weird, because there is something that's trying to come through you and the world needs it, no matter how uncertain or uncertain it might be. The world needs your unique self.
So do the thing before the thing makes you do the thing anyways.
Yeah.
I think maybe just like Google the thing you're interested in the city where it is and see, I guess, because that works for me. Or if you know somebody that's involved in something, just have a talk with them. Because oftentimes we all need help. Like these nonprofits are stretched to the max. They rely on the people working there to go above and beyond. And if some volunteers can take off that weight, they'll definitely take it on, is my sort of thought on the whole thing. So just if you have time and energy and you can find somewhere to offer it, then that's definitely the first step.
Those were so good. Do all the things everyone else said you should do. Do that. I would say remember to boost your own morale. So whenever I go into a project, I try and have a few goals that are low-hanging fruit. It's pretty achievable. And then I try to have grand aspirations, because for me, I really need to have that bigger vision that I'm working towards. So that's for me. Maybe it's not for everyone. And then I would also make a checklist and get really detailed with your checklist, because for me, having checked things off makes me feel awesome, even if it's like part of the task. And the other thing that's really important for me personally is being accountable to someone I really don't want to disappoint. So I try to surround myself with people that I'm accountable to. And so, for example, right now I'm in a 1-week trial of not using single-use plastics, and I'm in a WhatsApp group where I report back to people, and on day 1 I forgot I was doing the trial and I had to tell them. So I do that. Also, like, writing letters is not for everyone, but while our systems still work, it's one of the most important things we can do. Writing letters to elected officials.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that anybody can do, even no matter how busy you are. If that's can be 10 minutes that you could do to work on that.
It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to know everything. You can just say, hey, I care about climate change sincerely. It can be that simple. It's partly what I vote on. Yeah.
It's stuff I always tell people to look at what's around them. Like, I maybe start in your immediate community if you're motivated by specific concerns that like are directly impacting you or your community or nearby. Look for other folks who share those same concerns and get organized amongst yourselves together. You can look for other organizations or grassroots mobilizations in your community who even if it's maybe not specific to the issue that you're particularly concerned about, any sort of organization where there's people being brought together to work against issues is helpful. We need to often with this work, it's about building the leverage that's needed to sort of have the public pressure that's required to either hold government accountable to its existing commitments or get it to change or reverse policies or make improvements in any way. So that like mass character is needed. So any sort of group mobilization or organization is helpful. But yeah, I mean, I can understand how it would be tough if you're just sort of starting from scratch, Googling what orgs are doing what near you in your city. But yeah, I think starting there, maybe if you're inspired, I guess if they're already inspired, if the inspiration has already struck, maybe somebody has done so. Like maybe somebody has inspired them or they're seeing work being done by other groups. So that may be a way in, like maybe reach out to that person. If it's on social media, people are genuinely pretty friendly. I just think pick one and give it a shot. Like it's better than sitting at home and worrying that you're not doing anything to help. Like find an organization that you think best represents your own concerns, your goals, your values, and see what options they have for you, like whether there's anything going on near you, town hall events, those sorts of things. There's ways to get involved. It's just, yeah, I mean, I'm not, yeah, I guess I'm not necessarily blind to the fact that there's a lot of options and a lot of despair. So it's easy to sort of maybe not get involved, but just I think taking that first step, taking that leap. If the organization isn't for you after a bit, you can move on. There's nothing holding you there. But yeah, we need all the help we can get. So anybody who's listening to this and thinking about these issues, like please take that step, get yourselves involved some way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Philip said, find your community. No one can or should do this alone, both sort of intellectually, but also, just, needing that community for moral, emotional support and inspiration. So, find a community that resonates with what you're trying to achieve and the way that you want to interact with the issue. Connect with organizations. You also don't need to do all the research yourself. There's a very good chance that other folks have sort of thought about the problem, broken it down into the key leverage points. I think it can be really easy, especially when you're new to advocacy or activism, to try and want to do everything, and you spread yourself so thin. And I kind of sometimes think about that as I call it the spaghetti on the wall approach, where you just like throw some wet spaghetti on the wall and hope something sticks, but you're just like kind of aiming or aimless. Organizations like CPAWS, like AWA, like, other organizations out there have thought a lot about where are key lever points. So connect with those folks to think, where is it going to be best to put your energy and effort? Because we all only have limited energy and effort, and we do not want to burn ourselves out. Because as Philip said, we need everyone in this work, and so it's really important to do that. And then have fun. Like on that burnout thing, it can be really easy to be despaired. So you've got the community, you've got the information, and then like don't be afraid to have a little fun, even in the despair. And I think that's something our team and the folks I do work with pretty well, is that we can be making fun of ourselves, we can make fun of the situation, we can be finding joy in the little moments, and I think that's all of those things are really important.
Yeah, maybe also just inspired by something Katie said there. Like, there's room for all sorts of talents in this work. We need people of like all stripes and colors, and so whether it's like, I don't know, if you're concerned about the environment, maybe host like a little art night, like for folks who feel the same. Like if you're an artist or otherwise, like there's plenty of ways to sort of get the ball rolling. And yeah, we're gonna need everybody's abilities.
Yeah, I think that's so right. I think about, so what I often say to folks in relation to the Calgary Climate Hub is, hey, look, if you're an accountant, boy, do we need accountants. If you're an event planner, boy, oh boy, do we need event planners.
For sure.
Whatever you are, we probably need you. And, the other thing that you guys are touching on is that, finding that group. And so to me, I feel like, if you're passionate about something and you know what it is, there's probably somebody in your city or within range of you that's doing something on it. Go and see if that's your jam, because one of the best things that ever happened to me in my whole life was finding that table to sit around with a bunch of other smart people that that aren't just there to talk. They're there to find a solution and there to push for it and try to get something done. I often bring up the Joan Baez quote: "The antidote to despair is action." And with my organization, I've lived it. And I look to your two organizations all the time to see some great work being done. So that's anybody within range of my voice. Find what you care about and find other people that care about it too, and join a team. Become a part of the Avengers of whatever it is you want to accomplish. I guess the next question I want to, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add something to that, Steve, because I think the other piece that people can feel overwhelmed by is that they then need to feel like it needs to consume their life. I mean, Philip and I have either the blessing or the curse of of doing this full time, and then often
Right.
also in our free time, I think.
Yeah.
Me too.
But we don't just need people who work for conservation organizations to be doing this work. You can find how it fits into your life in a way that doesn't consume it, that you can still have, you know, the other things that are important to you in your life, and be part of the solution and be contributed to change.
Yeah, you know, so the other thing I end up saying to folks is yes, we'll take whatever your existing skill set is, but you know, maybe there's something you've always wanted to do and you just haven't got, or maybe you've always wanted to host events or attend protests or any of these things. It doesn't have to be something that you're good at now. It could be something that you just want to do. Maybe you want to apply dust off some graphic design skills, whatever it is. We need you.
One thing, Steve, that just occurred to me listening to these other folks.
By all means.
You know, sometimes that act of, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do, that's just a really rate limiting step that you can't get past it. So for anybody out there thinking, I don't know what to do, whatever organization of any of the ones here today and others, they know what they want people to do and what is needed for people to do. So reaching out saying, I want to be involved, what can I do? I didn't know when I contacted the Climate Hub, I didn't know about the nature node and the mini forests. And they said, hey, there's this new project. And I thought, perfect, that's exactly what I want to do. But I never would have thought of it on my own. So reach out to the organization and they'll help you find choices of how you can get involved.
Heather, you took my answer. I was just about to say pretty much exactly that.
Sorry, Steve. Sorry.
No, that's wonderful. But just to re-articulate and you know, to pump the hub's tires a little bit, is that, you know, what the best thing that I think you can do is find that local group that's working on the problem. And what I've found is there's nothing like when that smoke out there is so thick that you can taste it, and there's that yellowy nicotine orangish haze over a city, I'm really not fit for other human beings until I've found the opportunity to sit around a table with a bunch of smart people who are working on the problem. And from there, that's where you start to feel better about it. That's where you're not working in your own little silo and driving yourself crazy drinking coffee at 3 a.m. You're more effective. You're working with people who have looked into the problem, have looked into solutions, have strategies of change. This is this is how you get this stuff done. That's I believe it in my heart, and quite frankly, I've lived it. I want to be respectful of everybody's time here, so maybe I'll just close with a little bit of just asking each of you what's your call to action for our viewers or listeners, specifically for your organizations, or it could be for larger things, but I do want to give you a chance to get the word out about how folks can help what you're trying to do if you have said something that inspired them today. And I think you all have said very inspiring things. So maybe Heather, I'll start with you.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the Hub is having a donation drive right now. So people can always donate to the Hub. Any little bit helps. So that's a step that I think helps the Hub keep going with what it's doing. But I would really encourage people to check out our website and look at the events coming up. We have some advocacy campaigns running that people can get involved in if they would like to share their thoughts with city councilors about transportation and bike lanes and work to improve those. And then just read about our different programs and see what appeals to you, what speaks to you about joining us in the work, and then getting in touch, and we'll help you find a place. But there's lots of different ways to be involved.
We also have a donation drive right now, so you can always go and donate to Green Calgary as well. But you know, I'd say just go out and get involved with any of us doing anything. You know, we all have tons of stuff that you can volunteer for, things that you can, you know, events that you can join. And you know, once you start getting out to any of those sorts of things, if you're coming out to one of our events or a Climate Hub event or anybody, you're going to start finding other people who are parts of all of these networks, and you know, you're going to find your people. So yeah, I just say come out to any of that stuff.
Not a specific campaign plug right this second, but I just want to, you know, reemphasize that we're seeing a lot of like disturbing and rapid changes to sort of wildlife hunting and trapping regulations and policies in the province at the moment, and this is a huge concern, and we're hearing it from people on the ground. Like AWA has received numerous calls that I've taken, and we see, just really letting people know that we see the problem and something needs to be done. Again, like a lot of this is going to take public will and public pressure. So if folks are concerned about this issue, please get in touch, and also like connect with other folks who maybe share those same views. Like we were saying before, the fact that some of these changes are being done without consultation is definitely concerning. And so, yeah, I'm really just echoing sort of what we're hearing on the ground as a concern, and that environmental groups like CPAWS as well are definitely working on. But yeah, trying to find the way to fix these things is the puzzle we're here to solve.
I have many call to actions, and that's, maybe I don't want to mention all of them because I feel like right now there's actually so much going on that it can be a little bit overwhelming. And, you know, coal and forestry and the government's nature strategy and the plan for parks and the South Saskatchewan regional plan. So, you know, if any of those things, or when you go on our website, pique your interest, then, you know, get involved in those pieces. We have a take action section of our website that shows the various calls for action going on right now. We've got an events section, and we have, you know, events going on all the time. Sometimes, you know, Indigenous led nature walks or speaker events, or those places that where you can find community. We've also got resources on how to get engaged, how to write a letter to your MLA, how to meet with elected representatives. So, you know, yeah, there is almost too much. I don't want to, like, we've been talking really hopeful, so I don't want to overwhelm folks, but it is that big picture,
Sure.
right? There is too much. And so there's a lot of different areas that people can get engaged, and I would love for folks to do that and get involved with CPAWS and the work that we're doing.
Well, if you want to get involved with Nature Calgary, we are certainly looking for volunteers or board members. You don't have to have a specific area of expertise, but we've got a lot of moving parts. And we are going through a time of transition, and we are definitely interested in more keen people volunteering their time and energy. So we have a long history in Calgary. We've got a reputation with city council that has still been maintained. So there's a lot of opportunities, but yeah, otherwise, I think generally I serve on a number of boards. Everybody is suffering right now with a lack of resources. And if you have always wanted to volunteer or been interested in getting involved, now is the time more than ever, in my opinion, because funding is down. People don't have as much time to volunteer. People are suffering financially. So as a result, everybody is working at the edge of their capacity. And we can all use the help. And Climate Hub, I think, is probably in the exact same position. So if you want to volunteer for Climate Hub, do that too.
Yeah, I won't say anything specific about our organizations. We're still trying to figure this out, but I think it starts with rest. So take a nap or go to bed early, drink lots of water, try to eat as much local food as possible, support your local farmers, your local businesses. If you have the ability to plan to get a rain barrel next year for your garden, the amount of water we can slow down and use in our local landscape, the better. Tell your friends to get a rain barrel from Green Calgary. Ride your bike, check on your friends. Yeah, and just follow that voice that's inside you. Go talk to a tree. Say hi to the birds. That's really that's really, these little actions seem so inconsequential. You don't need to go out and do big things. Those big things will find you if you do the little things. And yeah, just a small, yeah, all those things can make a big difference. So thanks for having us, Steve. And it's been a pleasure to hear from everybody.
Go talk to a tree is a great piece of advice. And it's making me think of a grade 4 student we were talking to about walking to school. And he said, when you walk to school, you move more slowly and you notice things like, how is that tree doing? And if I'm driving by it, I'm not noticing my local tree or taking care of it. And I thought that was so lovely. We also will have 2 funding drives coming out, one general, one to help grade 4 students turn their local street into a park, which we're pretty excited about. And then over the coming year and leading up to the municipal election, I'd say the biggest thing we can do as a city is invest in transit. That has such an impact on equity, on climate, on economic development, on convenience, on being gender equitable. So let's write to our counselors, let's talk to candidates who come to your door and talk about transit and the critical nature, especially in a sprawling city like Calgary, of investing in transit.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for coming on the show. I wanted to do something inspiring today, and that's exactly what you did for me, and I think for our listeners and viewers as well. I didn't even think about the other thing the whole time here. So thank you so much for not just coming on to the show, but being exactly who you are and doing exactly what you're doing. The world needs more of you. And I also want to thank Elaine and the Arusha Center for putting some grant funding together for this show. I don't think it could have landed at a better time. At all, this is a perfect time to have this kind of show come out. So thank you, Elaine and Arusha Center.
No problem.
Thanks,
No problem.
Steve. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And I hope we can continue these conversations and learn from one another and interact more on a regular basis. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Enjoy your evening.